Michelle here. I'm the executive director at WellShare. And, changing lives is a real privilege. At WellShare, we do this every day. And we're inviting all of you who are attending to play an integral part in what we do. Today, you're going to hear about the positive impact we're having on the epidemic of mental health crises across our communities. Focusing on mental health and early childhood development today, you'll hear why parents say to us things like, "My children and I benefited more than I could have imagined from your program." Or, "I want you to know how much I enjoyed your support and walking this journey with you. I feel we're in a safe space with you." Across all segments of society, we see anxiety, depression, and self-harm soaring. Suicides and overdose deaths are reaching new highs, and emergency rooms continue to be overwhelmed with people who did not get the help they needed to prevent crisis. Many of us have not yet returned to normal since the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, and now we've got economic challenges on our hands as well. Now, I want to try to help put you in the shoes a bit of some of the people we serve. Imagine you're living in Minnesota. You live here, though, after having made a long journey from a refugee camp, say in Africa or Southeast Asia, or perhaps having traveled a migratory path from Latin America. And imagine that the natural and man-made disasters you fled continue to play out in the place you called home. They continue to take the lives and well-being of loved ones you left behind. So many of our staff experience that every day, as well as the people we serve. Imagine that every day you carry that mental and physical challenge of repeated loss, and now you also face the challenge of navigating systems here in Minnesota, health, social support system, that are difficult to understand and themselves overwhelmed with demand. Imagine that you're trying to navigate systems that are themselves in the process of addressing the challenges of racism in their own operations, and that require you to be fluent in English to get your needs met. This is the reality for so many people that WellShare serves. In the words of our community partners, mental health is our #1 concern these days. They were not saying that, 2-3 years ago. This is a new thing. And WellShare's community health worker model is made for such times. In recent years, our community health workers have been recognized by Governor Walz, clinic systems such as Mayo and Fairview, and public health leaders like Mike Osterholm. We've been recognized as the health and equity racial workforce that is needed to overcome such barriers. And we continue to pioneer innovation, boots on the ground responses, and hope you'll join us in this effort. So today you're going to hear from Dr. Alyssa Vang, who's president of Vanguard Mental Health and Wellness Clinic, and also Nasra Hassan, who is one of WellShare's lead community health workers. And they're going to talk about the intersection of mental health and child development as they experience it in their day-to-day work. So with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Vang to share her perspective on the opportunity at hand and how WellShare's approach could be a game changer. So Dr. Vang, I'll pass the baton to you, the talking stick.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Michelle, for that great introduction about WellShare. And good morning, everyone, and welcome. It is my pleasure to be here today with you all, and I would like to thank WellShare for this opportunity. I want to start first by sharing a case from my home community. On July 1st, 2022, Molly Chang, a 23-year-old Hmong mother, shocked my home community and made headline news when she took her own life and the life of all 3 of her children, ages 3, 4, and 5, in a triple suicide homicide case. Their bodies were later recovered from Van Nuys Lake. Her husband, Yi Lee, had taken his life earlier that day with a gun. Molly and Yi both immigrated to the United States from a Thai refugee camp in that last wave of Hmong refugee resettlement from 2004 to 2006. There are speculations after this tragedy that marital problems, mental health challenges, cultural beliefs, and Molly's own history of trauma as having been adopted may have affected this outcome. When I heard about this case, the one thing on my mind was, how did this family get to this place where death was the only answer? Was there sufficient and appropriate help? Were there differing beliefs about the etiology and manifestations of emotional and mental health that may have discouraged help seeking? And if the family did seek help, were there culturally responsive services that they could have easily accessed? And what other barriers existed? Were there stigma and different beliefs around solutions that may have complicated this case? And I couldn't help wondering that if there were more culturally responsive, linguistically competent, and community-based services that was more accessible to help bridge these gaps, could this have made a difference in Molly's life and in the lives of her children and her husband? I believe that it could. And I believe that more family strengthening, community-based programs that provide culturally sensitive education and culturally responsive support need to be developed and provided at the systemic level, at the community level, and at the personal level in order to help families like Molly's so that parents can manage their own challenges, including their mental health, and attend appropriately to the needs of their children. Now, did you know that 1 out of 3 asylum seekers and refugees experience high rates of depression, anxiety, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder? As Michelle mentioned, poverty, housing challenges, poor access to services, language barriers, and a whole host of other disadvantages can all adversely impact one's mental health. We know that when parents are struggling, their ability to respond to the socio-emotional needs of children in ways that feel predictable and positive are profoundly compromised. Even more importantly, we know that when young children have a positive attachment to their caregivers, they come to see the world as safe and secure, thereby lending to a positive sense of self, fostering an individual that would grow up to have healthy interpersonal relationships. According to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the support and services a host country provides with that resettlement process is key and critical to helping new immigrants adjust and cope. If the host country fails to do this well, then family can struggle initially and for generations to come. Because our children are our next generation, how can we assist families so that they can manage their own mental health and provide that positive and safe bond with their children? Now, for centuries, I know that refugee and immigrant communities have successfully raised their children with positive attachment styles back in their homelands. However, when in a new host country, there may be numerous complicating and changing factors that are introduced by that host country that have made these same parenting approaches less effective. For example, for my community, the Hmong, whose roots are traced back to Laos, children are highly valued and deemed a blessing because they preserve the lineage of the family and also contribute to the wealth of the clan. So great care is prioritized with infants and toddlers, making sure they are held, fed, and attended to. Crying too long is a sign that their soul might be unhappy and thus might be vulnerable to evil spirits. And so young children are not left to cry for too long. And a blessing ceremony is often conducted after 3 days of their birth in order to protect their soul. Due to the Hmong's collectivist beliefs where interdependence is highly valued, families also lived in close proximity to one another. This living situation, often where many generations lived under one roof, meant that every family member, parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, were involved in caring for the children. Children were rarely neglected. Each family member also had a prescribed role. So a mother's primary goal, as an example, was to raise their children, prioritizing their child's needs over their own. The pride of this task often encouraged Hmong mothers to build strong and secure attachments with their children. With this collectivist child-rearing practice, Hmong children often grew up within a tight-knit community, knowing that they were loved and cared for. In fact, there was a study that was done here in the United States in the early 80s when the Hmong were first just arriving to the States in a local hospital. And they were looking at Hmong mothers and maternal depression and found that while some of the Hmong mothers reported symptoms consistent with postpartum depression, that they were in fact still very attentive to the needs of their infants. Currently, though, we see Hmong mothers like Molly Chang and Hmong families struggling to do the same, while they are trying to balance the complex problems and changing expectations of living in a new country. So as an example, housing guidelines that limit the number of people living under one roof means that multiple generations cannot live together, nor is it realistic that they live within close proximity of one another. And so the same support system from extended family that once upheld a community with attentive child-rearing practices is no longer viable. And the values of the dominant culture with its more individualistic focus have made it challenging for the Hmong social structure to exist as it once was. It is no wonder why refugee and immigrant populations are struggling to adjust. Now, resilience is the ability to adapt in the face of adversity. And resilience is time and context dependent, as well as a process that can be developed across individuals, families, and community levels. And so I know that programs that are community-based, linguistically competent, and culturally responsive can be that bridge to help families remain resilient. Such programs help families to receive support in their own communities that understand them and speak their language, while also getting the additional knowledge and new tools that they need to thrive in a new country. And for refugees, where trauma is very much a part of their story, of my story, these last few years living with the unpredictable fear and the sudden losses due to COVID have only exacerbated mental health challenges. And so helping families to engage with family strengthening, to build social networks, can create a sense of connectedness that will foster that increased resilience and improved mental health. And when families are healthier, they are more able to respond positively to their children's needs. And so how is WellShare addressing this? Here to answer that question and to provide more information about such programs is Nasra, who is a WellShare maternal and child health staff. So Nasra, I'm going to hand that over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vang and Michelle. I was just moved because the story that you talk about your community, it's also the same thing that is affected in our community. And sometimes it's hard to imagine, that this is only you, but, it's just all immigrants are facing this, and anybody who is new to, to United States and came from a different culture. And the same thing that you talked about it, raising a child was a community thing when we were back home. The way I was raised is different the way I raised. So as a WellShare community health worker and a parent educators, we go to the families and build relationship and trust, that they can trust us, that they know that we have their end goal in mind, because we ourselves have been immigrants. So as a WellShare community health workers, we go as a coach, as parent educators, and as a resource for the families. We help them whatever they need, but basically is raising a child in America is totally different the way they were raised. and not understanding for educational system, how can you even build a secure attachment where solely it was just when you have a network of a system that grandmother and aunties were ready to raise the child with you. Right now you are by yourself and you have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 kids who have a different emotional needs, and addressing it when there's no activity level, when, it's just, even when there's a resource out there, some communities are not open to that because they don't know how to access. So as a WellShare staff, we go there and meet their needs and talk about topics, discipline. How do you discipline your child? What does a secure attachment look like? What is sleep and routine? How can a mother take care of herself if she cannot take care of her, can take care of her children if she is not feeling well and healthy? We have a similar stories that people are going through mental health. And one scenario that often happens is that parents lose their mental health because they don't have a support system. And we have a story that happened in Minnesota that a mother killed her children. And it's not out there because sometimes every community is isolated from other people and their stories are not seen. So I think mental health of the parent is important. So when we go there, we sit down, we are active listener. We listen to their stories. We are caseworkers. We are an advocate. We are a coach. So we do multiple things for the families. Such, connecting to resources is one of the things. As a mother, I go there and ask, what is it that you need? Some parents do not ever know how to get a preschool education. How can I sign up for my child? What does the enrichment program look like at the parks or the YMCAs that are next to you? So it's important that we go there open heart and no judgmental, and just being there for that family, and that knowing that they can trust us and give them whatever that they need at that time. So I hope that, answers, and it's not only me, but, all the programs that we work with East African communities, all our parent educators are doing the similar stories. So I don't know about the time sensitive, if I could keep going, or do I have time? Yeah, I think it's 8:50, so.
Yeah, no, that's great, Nasra. That's great, Nasra. Have we gotten any questions? I'm looking to Jessica for that.
Please submit your questions in the chat box.
Good. Nasra, maybe you can tell, I love your story of how you chose to become a community health worker. Maybe you can share that, and then if there are no questions, we can bring it to a close after that. But I just think your own personal journey story to where you're at now is really inspirational. And
yeah, thank you, Michelle. Definitely. I worked in Minneapolis public schools for 7 years and see at firsthand when our kids, specifically Somali kids, come to school, they are not ready for kindergarten class. They do a catch up. They cannot write their names. They do not even know how to hold a pencil. And I used to give the assessment just as little as like show me the front page of the book. So to me, I used to say, oh my God, if I have the ability to work with the families and kids in early age and can change their lives, just when they come to kindergarten, they know how to learn. They have the basic foundations just to be a kindergarten and not stressed out, catching up, and staying from their recess to just practice their ABCs. So coming to WellShare, thanks God, that enabled me to do that and sit down with families and build library section, connect them to the libraries, making sure that they have books, that mothers make time for the child to ask questions, to play with them. And that every day is how I measure progress. Did I make any change for that, person's life, for that child? Children come and run into me and ask me, teacher, right? So it's my job to give the power to the mother and say, okay, this is your mother. You can do this activity with the mother. And I sit outside, make sure that they have built that relationship. And at the end of the day, I told the parents, you are the first teacher of your child. You are the child that the mother who is working more than 6-8 hours with a child. So talk to them, sing with them, like, and also connect with the background the way we were raised, because we were just not sent outside. We, had mothers who sing to us, who play with us. And it's hard when you are living in the United States and, of course, 2-bedroom apartment that you have 4 kids and there's no space to play, right? So my job when I go there is, hey, maybe you can move this section here and this will be a play area. You can turn the TV off and, let the children play with each other and you can ask questions. So to me, I'm very passionate for this program. And I believe that all of us are changing lives, whether we talk to a mother and listen how to, tell her and share with her how to reduce her stress or how to play with her kids or how to connect with others and look for resources and to say, it's okay, I need help. So my passion came from being in a school, but also realizing that the foundation is, earlier, and starting and building that child's foundation in early age enables them to be successful in education and where they want to go in the future. And it's the same thing that, our children, we value our children. And I ask the same thing, where do you want to with your child? What do you want them to do? And if you have an end goal, then you should be helping them, reach that goal by changing your life habit and, making a space for your child to grow. So thank you, Michelle. That's my story. I love it. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And we are getting some questions, but I want to invite you to also just share very briefly a couple sentences about the success you've had with your own children and your daughter. What did she just do this fall? I'm so good. This is what's possible. So
I have 2 girls, and as I said, children don't come with a manual, to how to raise and how to do. There's no book that, but always I wanted to do the best that I can as a mother. And I share that stories with my parents that I work with. Just be there. Time is the very thing that you can give your child, and sometimes it's a very expensive thing that we cannot afford to lose. So I have 2 girls, and one thing that I can look back is just I was there. I tried to be there for them as much as I could. And one of them is attending at the University of Minnesota and pursuing a graphic designer. And my youngest one just get accepted a full ride scholarship at the University of Chicago. So thank you. But I mean, as an immigrant person who didn't have a lot of education background and coming here and hustling and seeing that possibility for my children is where I want for my families to, be in the future and not be, trapped for being a poor or living in subsidized housing. I lived in subsidized housing and I worked so many jobs and I have been in so many places, but that was not something to hinder me. It was just the possibility that I can keep going and work hard. And some of the families, I see that, and when I talk to a mother, I told them this is not the end goal. You can do better. You can do better for your kids. And just give time and sit down with them and play with them and just hope for the best, but also do your job. Because as a parent, if I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for me. And this is not a unique story. Mm-hmm. There's so many other families who have done that in different communities. So, yeah.
Great, good. Well, now we have lots of questions, and I'm going to take one, and we'll see if we have time for others. And Nasra, this one is directed to you, actually. But Dr. Vang, you might have some ideas as well. So Zdenka says, from my experience, it's been found truly beneficial when schools have direct access to mental health resources with providers directly available on site. Nasra, what is your experience in terms of access to such resources in our educational system, and how well can we expand these resources?
Well, I can tell you that Minneapolis Public Schools, I worked, and that's the largest district in Minneapolis. There's no enough people to support children with mental health. And again, even if there's a resource out there, the brown and Black community are not usually have the access. And because again, you cannot ask what you don't know. So sometimes it could be that. But I wish if it's up to me, I would have every classroom have a a mental health person or behavioral, I have witnessed a kindergarten who were sent to the principal's office every day. It's a 5-year-old. So I think addressing and sitting down with that child, if they have someone to sit down and just looking up for them, children we know are ready to learn. They want to come to school. They just don't come here to play. They just come to be in the system that they want to learn and thrive. But because of the class size and lack of support of the teachers, and there's so much a problem. So if it's up to me, I would have changed, but nobody's asking how to change it and giving the classroom teachers the power to support the children. Yeah.
Thank you. May I add a couple of my thoughts to that as well? I think that school-based mental health services are wonderful in that it solves our access struggles that we've had years before, right? Years before, teachers, school staff would notice that a child is struggling with mental health and would really connect with families and express their concerns. But then the ball falls into the court of the parents to initiate a service, and sometimes the ball gets dropped. And so the school-based mental health services now just brings that access into the schools, which is wonderful and is meeting the needs of the child. And I think those who provide school-based mental health services, their caseload is just overflowing because there's so many referrals coming through. And that's the first step. The other thing that we're seeing now with that barrier already addressed is that we still need families to be heavily involved in their child's mental health care. And so when we do that, in a lot of ways, it's better than nothing. But then we find that we're treating the child in isolation when they actually exist within a system. And so I know that Ramsey County is really trying to bring in families and integrate families into the school-based mental health programs. And I think that's the next step that we need to really figure out, okay, now we have access for the child, but they still go home to a very challenging family where parents are probably juggling a lot of stressors. How can we now meet that barrier? How can we overcome that barrier and provide services for the family? And I think that's a wonderful, innovative idea, and it remains to be determined how that's going to go. And we're always changing as we find out the lessons learned from these ideas that are meant to bridge these gaps. The one other thing I want to mention, I know our time is up, but I do want to mention this, is that programs like WellShare is seen as a preventative program, right? And less as an intervention. And, yet at the same time, we can't wait until it's too late, like in the Molly Chang incident. And so we need funders to really fund programs like WellShare so that they can continue to do the work at the prevention, at the educational level, because there is no other way that they can do this work until there's funding for it. And I, work with other grassroots projects, and I know how passionate the team is, but I know that when there's no money and you're working on, just volunteerism and asking everyone to just volunteer their time, that program isn't sustainable long-term. And so that is why we're here, to ask you to really support programs like this, where we're preventing families from crises, where we're helping children, like in Nasra's situation, to succeed and do well and thrive and then come back as contributing citizens for our community.
Yeah, thank you for those final comments to both of you. And thank you for sharing. I mean, what a beautiful, weaving together of perspectives and stories and, professional expertise and knowledge of what works and doesn't work. So thank you both for sharing. In the final minute or two, I do want to thank everybody else who attended. I also would really like to give a shout out to our generous sponsors. You can see their logos above my head. But we got some really wonderful corporate sponsorship for a series of events. This is one of a series of events that WellShare is holding this year, fundraising events. And I want to note first and foremost Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health, who not only supported this event financially, but also connected us to Dr. Vang, a great new friend to the organization. Also, I'd like to recognize Alina, 3M, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, UCare, the Mayo Clinic, American National Bank, Newport Academy, University of Minnesota Fairview, the University of Minnesota School of Public Health, the University of Minnesota Center for Leadership, Education in Maternal and Child Health. So there are lots of institutions, lots of individuals out there who care and who are supporting our work in particular. And I'd invite you to do the same. So, thank you again for taking your time this morning to join us and learn about this issue that really impacts every one of us. Directly or indirectly, we are all impacted. And any donation you make today and in the future, helps us reach more families that will impact not just this generation, but as you see Nasra's personal story, many generations to come. It's just that one hand up, that one support that some mothers and fathers need to make a difference in their children's lives in the future. So please go out. We're going to record this. We'll send this to you. Please share this with other people in your network. And if you choose to give, we've got a $50,000 goal, and we would love to have any contributions you or again, your broader network would like to make to this. So thank you all. Yeah, go ahead, Nasra.
I just want to say thank you so much. It takes the whole village to raise a kid. So please, as we said, we need this program, and we need to change the level of citizenship and what that looks like, and given the equity lenses that everybody needs to be addressed, because not everybody has everything to succeed, and everybody can use a little support. And one of the ways that we can support is just keeping this program going, because early childhood helps the adult in the future. So this child is easy to fix right now, but we cannot fix when they are 20 and above. So please help as much as you can. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Great. Have a wonderful day, everybody. The sun is shining where I'm sitting. Go out, hopefully get some fresh air, breathe, move, enjoy.